You've got big projects to tackle, but your day gets swallowed up by repetitive tasks and constant inquiries. It's hard to make progress when you're stuck putting out fires. That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. Acting like an extra set of hands, you get your time back for the high-impact projects. Ready to reclaim your time? Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
What a stretch we've had on I Want to Work There. Over the past 19 episodes, we've looked at talent attraction, talent experience, and talent retention, and all of the issues that feed into those three things when it comes to colleges and universities being employers of choice. Time and time again, something has come up: the importance of leadership. And I found someone with the perfect mantra so that presidents, boards, deans, whoever it is, can be great leaders, and that is lead from the heart. Mark Crowley is the author of the book and host of the podcast of the same name. He visited with I Want to Work There to give the business case for leading from the heart. Also, we talked through why it's difficult for some leaders to lead from the heart, and what is it going to look like for aspiring presidents to lead from the heart so that they can get great productivity out of their faculty and staff. Hey, do me a favor, as always, please like the episode, share the episode, and give us some feedback. All right, here we go with this episode of I Want to Work There. Welcome to I Want to Work There, a podcast that helps colleges and universities boost their brands as employers of choice. I'm your host, Eddie Francis, brand strategy consultant for Edify Ventures. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in talent recruitment and retention, human resources, and marketing and communications inside and outside of higher education. I Want to Work There is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals just like you grow, and explore our other shows at enrollify.org, or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Thank you for joining me on I Want to Work There. I'm Eddie Francis. Joining me is someone I am so pleased to talk to. His name is Mark Crowley. Now, if you don't know the name, you probably know his book. You probably know his podcast, Lead from the Heart. Aha, now you know who he is. Mark, thank you so much for joining me on I Want to Work There. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me on, Eddie. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, man, I really latched on to you and your mantra of lead from the heart on Twitter, which is now known by some other ridiculous name. And, your tweets just brought a lot of life to me, just your idea of leading from the heart. And you come from a really interesting area, financial services, right? Is what a lot of your background is. So tell us the story. What led to your lead from the heart mantra, the book, and the podcast?
It's a big story.
It's a good one then.
It's a journey that at some point when I looked at through the sequence of my life, I went, oh man, like this is what I'm here for. Like it's that kind of a right. So this isn't a message that comes lightly to me. This isn't something that, I'm just throwing out there. It's like everything that I learned in my life and validated in my life. So I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of this. Mom died when I was very young. Shocking. Father was having an affair with a woman while she was dying, married her, moved me away from my older brothers and sisters from where I grew up and had stability. And then at 18 years old, after psychologically and emotionally abusing me my entire childhood and beating the shit out of my self esteem, he kicked me out of the house with no money, no support, never went back, never saw him again for a holiday, birthday, Christmas, etc. And so, he sort of set me up for failure. But he told me that I was going to be an abject failure. Like he wanted me to believe that. And gratefully, I had a woman next door who just saw what was going on and said, "You're not what you're hearing over here. You're something very different, and you're something special, and you need to believe that." And it helped me because that was my own self assessment. But nevertheless, when he kicked me out of the house, I made the decision that if I didn't graduate from college, that it was binary. He was right, and I'm going to be the failure. So no money, no home, no real social support, no family support. All my brothers and sisters were just starting their families back, 3,000 miles away. They weren't in any position to sort of take me in and figure it all out. So I worked really hard, finally got into a rhythm, work, school, school, work. That was my life until I graduated and graduated from a great university. But you can imagine the struggle of that. A car breaks down, game over. You can't figure out, if you don't have $50 to pay for a car repair or $500 today, whatever, you're out. Like, what am I going to do? And so I was always under this constant threat and pressure. So what ended up happening was when I was graduating, I started asking all these people around me, like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going off to graduate school. I'm going off to business school. I'm going off to law school. And I had this sort of feeling like I'm just lucky to be here. Like, I'm just lucky to graduate. I couldn't see that what I had triumphed over to get my degree was far more than the people that got to live at home on Thanksgiving and Christmas and summer vacations and had family going, how'd you do on your test and great job and hang in there and writing checks to, help you or even support your tuition. I had none of that. So I started looking and I'm like, why am I less confident than these people when I should be even more confident because of what I overcame? Much of it was because my father had a deep effect on me. But I started thinking about, well, what was it that separated me from them? And I started to realize that they had empathy. They had somebody that cared about them, someone who loved them, someone who taught them, someone who, I remember going into my dean and he goes, "What year do you think you're in?" And I said, "I'm a junior." And he goes, you might think you're a junior, but you don't have the proper classes to be the equivalent of a junior. Like, you've been taking wrong classes. And I'm like, really? Why didn't somebody tell me that? He goes, normally parents do that. They'll help you with, figuring out in your first year which classes to take. And I'm like, okay, another blow. And so what I realized was that if I had been cared about, if someone who really had my best interest at heart, no pun intended, somebody who had my back, they would have done all of those things. So fast forward, I go to manage people, and I can tell you that I didn't do this consciously at first, but in the back of my mind, it was like, how much more confident and successful could I have been at when I'm graduating from college if I had had what I perceived all these other people had. So when I started managing people, I think it was sort of like this unconscious experiment. Like, what would happen to people if I just supported them, cared about them, made them feel safe? I never felt safe. And safety on Maslow's pyramid is like baseline, right? So if you're not living in safety, you're never going to get to the top. And I taught them everything that I knew. If I read a book, I'd summarize it. I made people feel appreciated. I'd see their potential and say, "Hey, I want to work with you on this and grow you." I promoted people from my team to other responsibilities so people had a sense that, like, this is somebody I want to work for. So every team that I ever had, basically my entire career, every job that I got, I excelled in. And I excelled in it because people could feel that I was someone who deeply cared about them and they wanted to reciprocate and do good work for me, which they did. And I, by the way, and I think may have gotten this just because of the experience that I went through early on, but I'm a competitive guy. So, people hear the expression "lead from the heart" and they go, "Oh, he must be a softie or a spiritual
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
a religious nut, somebody who doesn't know business." But my teams outperformed everybody else because I used to tell them, "You're getting more support from me." Like, I'm saying, I'm giving you this and it's genuine, but you're still getting it. And so if you're getting it, we should be setting a higher bar and performing at a higher level because no one else is getting this. And that's exactly what happened. And that became my mantra. But there's a deep, it's like if you're not rewarding people and you're asking people to scale a higher bar, that's not fair. My people were always getting rewarded if they excelled. So it was in their best interest. So it was always a win win. So I'm not pushing them to do something and exploit them. I'm saying you can be better. You can have more accomplishment. You can have more satisfaction in what you're doing every day. And so let's aim high. And we did. And so just sequentially through the course of my career, always very successful. So at this point in my career, I have proved that these practices work. I've proved it over and over. And you mentioned financial services. This is an awful environment. Like this is a very competitive. If you don't cut it 2 quarters in the row, you're out kind of a person. And that's true in management and leadership too. It's like, well, he's not getting it, he's not getting the numbers. So I proved that it works in the most toxic environments. But the final piece of this was that I ended up leaving the organization that I was working for. I'd just been named leader of the year. You can see the little trophy back there. Um, and I decided that I was going to write a book. And the purpose of the book was to say, if you do these practices, then you'll get the same results that I did. And they're untraditional, uncommon practices. So I'm saying do these and you're going to succeed as a leader. That was the book. And a friend of mine that I used to work with, who I'm calling like a Buddha or a godsend or whatever, called me one day, and he was interested in how I was doing, like how I'm doing with this book project, because I've never written a book before, and he was curious as to how it was going. So I told him I'm just about to write. I've got basically 5 practices that I'm going to be writing about, and that's the book. And he goes, "Well, aren't you going to explain why they work?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, people are going to think you needed a shitty childhood in order to lead like this." And it was overwhelming to me, Eddie, because I realized A, I hadn't done the work, and B, he was right. Like I thought people would just take me at my word. So I spent well over a year looking for research to validate what I already knew to be true. And here's the punchline. Uh, he challenged me. His name was Doug Jackson, and he challenged me. He goes, figure out what it was that was going on inside the people that made people respond the way they did to you. What were you doing? And he set it up perfectly. And I realized, like, I believed at the end of the day, I was affecting the hearts in people, which sounds completely crazy. Nevertheless, I believed it. I also thought it was game over at this point. I told my wife I've wasted a year of my life because people are going to hear lead from the heart and they're going to think guy's insane. And she goes, well, haven't you already proved it? And I go, well, yeah. So she goes, well, go back and find somebody else who can validate what you already know to be true. So another Buddha. So I met with a world class cardio surgeon and I wrote her a letter and I said, this is my thesis. I believe on a very deep level that I'm literally affecting the hearts in people. And if there's any truth in this, I'd like to meet with you. And she invited me into her office. I went to visit her and she just said, you figured out something we're just figuring out in medicine. We're finding out that the heart has its own intelligence, that it's connected to the brain, that the heart and the mind are constantly sending communication to each other, with the heart sending more information than the other way around. And the bottom line is that when we're having, like right now, you're having an experience, your whole body, including your heart, is having a sense of, is this guy a bullshitter? Is this a waste of my time? Did I pick the wrong guy to have on my podcast? Or this is interesting. I'm really intrigued by this. That's happening here in the body, sends a message up to the mind. And like if it's really bad, the mind's going to go, this is really bad.
Yeah.
Mark, I've got an emergency. We just had a flood.
It's like it's been a great conversation, Mark. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
grateful for having
Look
you
forward
on.
to seeing the book.
Right? Exactly. But we think that it's all here, and it's not.
Hmm.
It's the whole thing. But the heart plays a
Yeah.
huge role in it. So long way of getting to the answer. But when I got that information, when I got that clarity, that science is proving that this is true, that we are not rational beings at all. Up to 90% of the decisions we make are made by feelings and emotions. The mind makes sense of what we feel, not the other way around. So, what I'm saying is that if that's true, if you're trying to influence people, And to get them to support you, you've got to create feelings inside of them that would influence them to do that. And that just happens to be positive emotions. So, as somebody pointed out to me, he goes, whether you realized it or not, I didn't. He goes, you were a genius because you were giving everything that people needed: appreciation, growth, safety, right? Um, all the kinds of things that you would do to demonstrate that you care to people. That's a drip, 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 drip of positive emotions. And when people are experiencing a disproportionate ratio of positive to negative emotions, you're putting them into what he called their optimal level of performance. Like you're putting people into the state of being that allows them to do their best work. So I went out with Lead from the Heart because the literal science behind it, not so that I could be punched and have people go, what a crazy idea.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I was going to ask you about the business case, but you gave a business case for it. What I'm really interested in understanding is, why is it difficult for some leaders to lead from the heart? Why is it so difficult for them? Because we see a lot of this in higher education, where you have the abusive department chair, the abusive dean, the abusive president. Everybody just kinds of they put their heads down and they just deal with it in a lot of these cases. Why is that so difficult for some
Well,
leaders?
I think it's difficult for a lot of reasons. Start off with the title, right? So
Hmm.
I had a publisher tell me if I had worked with him when I was producing the book, he never would have in a million years let me go out with that title.
Hmm.
Simply because it's off-putting to so many people the way that you're describing this. It's like we don't do that in business. We don't do that in the
Yeah.
workplace, right?
Yeah. There's no crying in baseball, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I mean, it's like, why would you want to put it out there like that? Why I want to is because I'm convinced that this isn't going to be a foreign idea in the future. This isn't going to be something that, remember the game of Operation where you take the little tweezers and you know, that is going to go away. People are just going to go, yeah, that's kind of what we do now. Um, but so, irrespective of that, we have a traditional way of believing that we need to, basically squeeze people, keep people under a certain degree of fear and intimidation because people don't want to work. And the only way that we're going to make them work is by managing that way. So that's traditional leadership theory. Pay people as little as possible, squeeze as much out of them as possible. And it's gone on since the Industrial Revolution. So we just keep passing this on. So, like the people that you're talking about, they have never seen anybody manage any differently. And you give somebody power, and they're going to abuse it. Naturally, every one of us will do it. So if you don't understand, it's like getting in a Corvette the first time, and I'm just going to take this thing out for a drive, and you crash it because like you had no idea what kind of speed you had and power behind you. This is what people do. You make them a manager, and they revert to the oppressiveness of it. But I used to think that when the book came out, that CEOs would see the science and they'd go, "Wow, like he's showing us a new way, and it's got to be a better way than having low engagement and high turnover. Like, what if we created an environment that people really wanted to be a part of?" And it didn't happen, but it's happening now. And what's the mystifying to me, because I really did believe it was going to be a smart CEO who said we're going to change our culture, and it's not. What it is, just to show you, to your question, how much resistance there's been to this, the only reason it's changing is because workers are saying, pardon me, but well, I'm not going to even say it, there ain't no way in hell I'm going to work for you if you're going to manage me the way you're talking about. Right? Life is too short. COVID did a big number on people's sense of what they're willing to put up with, but it's forcing companies to say, we're getting enough feedback that the way we're managing people is so toxic that people don't want to work here, and that's not sustainable. So it's people who are Gen Z, Gen Y, who are forcing the change. And so I'm saying hallelujah to the bottom, not to the top, because the top, basically what they said was, I got to the top by being a jerk manager, whatever. That's a little bit more of a generalization, but I got there by doing it traditionally. So why would I want others to manage in a different way? Well, now it's being forced upon them, and the CEOs, which has a role that has massive turnover right now, we're at a moment in time where it's going to be the generation Gen Z was the first one to go, not doing this, not good. So they have this opportunity to fundamentally change workplaces, and it's beginning to happen.
Yeah. I've actually spoken to someone on this podcast about Gen Z, and by the end of that interview, I was rooting so hard for Gen Z. It was ridiculous. I mean, I have a lot of hope for Gen Z, because they have this distrust meter, but I think is going to serve them well as far as being trusted leaders, and hopefully leaders who do lead from the heart. You're listening to I Want to Work There. I'm Eddie Francis. We're talking to Mark Crowley. He is a speaker. He's an author. He is the author of Lead from the Heart, also the host of the podcast Lead from the Heart. So one of your episodes that I listened to, you had John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, and he talked about the importance of stakeholder trust. This is a big, big deal in higher education because you have the shared governance model. And what I was really wondering, he talked about stakeholder trust. He also said harmony of interest. He used that was I found that to be a very interesting phrase. But for you, when you think about um, the complex organization that higher education is, I mean, every campus is a small city. And when you think about that complex organization, for you, why do you think stakeholder trust is maybe even more important in higher education, with this model, and even going back to the harmony of interest? Why do you think those things are so important?
I think that I don't know what it was like when you went to college, but I'm on the tail end of the baby boomer generation, and when I went to school, and I even wrote about this. And I went to I just got ranked the third best public school in the country. So I went to a rigorous academic environment. We didn't have a football team. We still don't have a football team. We were Division III in basketball, so it was study, study, study. We had no fraternities. It was you come to work, you're here to learn something. And we were on the quarter system, so it was like more and more oppressive. It was just work, 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 learn, learn, learn. And so there wasn't a single person in all my years from the university that knew what I was up against, that knew the kind of stress that I was living in, and you know what I'm saying, to the extent that they could have offered uh, any kind of encouragement. Hey, we see what you're up against. We know you're all alone. We know you're trying to work your way through school. I mean, I ended up getting a loan last year, but there was nobody, even my professors, like no, professors, counselors, they nobody seemed to care about what was going on in my life, and that is a mistake that universities for the interesting I went to the University of California at San Diego, but there's another school in San Diego that figured this out before anybody else did. San Diego State University had one of the lowest graduation rates of any school in the country. And the ones that were graduating in 7 years, 8 years. They were just, yeah, I'm going. And so there was a chancellor who came in and he goes, "This is nonsense." So he did a couple things that were very uncommon, very unusual. The first one was he raised the stakes on how to get in there. So he's got a low performing school and he's basically saying it's going to be harder for you to get here now. Like, who would do that, right? But then what he did was he created counseling for freshmen. It's mandatory counseling every week. So if you're a freshman and you're looking around and you're not at home anymore and mom's not making your bed and making you dinner, and like you're having to assimilate and learn to go to school and grow up to be an adult, it shouldn't just be a drop off. we should just be pushing people off the cliff. To some extent, won't comment too long on this, but parents have gone overboard on this, But the point is, the university said, we're going to have you meet with a counselor. In this case, I think it was somebody from their own division. If they were a literature accounting major, it was somebody from there. And the conversation was, how are you, Eddie? Tell me what's going on in your life. Just broke up with your girlfriend? Too bad. No, they said, can I help you navigate that? What's going on with your job? How are you keeping up with your classes? So they got back to the whole focus of how are you doing as a student? But it started with how are you doing as a person? And I just thought this was just the most brilliant thing. And so guess what? 10 years later, they have one of the highest graduation rates of any college in America. And I truly believe it's because they created the stability for students so that they felt like they weren't alone. And if somebody had just said to me, what you're pulling off is pretty remarkable. Like, we don't have that many students that, have had to go through what you've gone through, and the loss and the torment and then financial difficulties and all that. You're doing well in school. Like, this is great. Keep it up. Is this something we can do for you? There's counselors here, or there's money for you here, or whatever. And I live near my university, and I run through it or I walk through it. And they now have like special places for students who, I mean, it's interesting, like food banks, and for students who are, like, they're much more looking out for them. So I think that the idea of university when I was there was top down. These are the classes. This is what you need to get through. And if you get through, we'll give you a degree. And now they're saying, like, it's your responsibility. You're on the hook, Eddie. You want a degree? It's on you, right? Instead of saying, how do we help Eddie? We think he's a smart guy and we welcome him in our university. How do we make sure he succeeds? It's a totally different orientation. And that's my orientation from a leadership standpoint. How do we help people succeed and feel like they belong somewhere and feel like they're doing something meaningful? It's a totally different way. Instead of saying, hey, Eddie, here's the deal. Here's your job. Here's your salary. You do a good job, bonus at the end of the year, couple weeks vacation. That's the deal. By the way, if you don't do so well, we may have to find somebody else because there's somebody else right outside waiting for your job. What did you hear? There's somebody waiting outside for my job. I'm already marinating in fear. I just think that's a stupid way to manage people.
Hey, it's Eddie Francis. Element 451 is hosting the AI Engage Summit on October 29th and 30th. This free virtual event features many of your favorite Enrollify creators and will explore AI's impact on student engagement, enrollment marketing, and institutional success. Learn to tap into AI to automate personalized outreach, improve your emails, streamline content creation, and boost campaign performance. Plus, hear directly from current students on how AI is influencing their engagement and campus life. As a matter of fact, that's a session that I'm moderating. Current student panel perspectives on AI is going to be October 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The AI Engage Summit is your guide to understanding and applying AI at your school. Registration is free. Visit element451.com to save your spot today. Now, back to the show. Yeah. I think what's happened with higher ed, to your point, over the past couple of years is that the veil's been lifted. Now, higher ed has this legitimate talent crisis going on, which is why I do this podcast in the first place. But I'm now seeing a pattern of the leaders who come in and who they might take a look at Lead from the Heart, and they may say, oh yeah, that's a great book, I'll read it, and then they go right back and do everything that they
Yeah,
had been doing.
I'm aware of
and
that.
and then they are surprised when they have high turnover, which, one of the things we have tried to impress upon leaders through this podcast is you pay more for high turnover is going to cost your institution more for a revolving door of employees. And so it's really interesting to me that you still have this pool of leaders who come into the higher ed environment. And even though they can see that they're hemorrhaging people and it's hard to keep up, they insist on doing the same thing over and over again. They insist on trying to lead the same way. Like you said, it turns into, well, somebody else is going to come take your job. And guess what? They open up that job, and where they would have had 200 people apply for it, now they have 20. Now
Yeah,
they
I
have
mean,
50 applying for it.
this is, the thing is that where I've been frustrated and where this has to go in order to be successful is that people like that have to be held accountable. So it's one thing to say, Eddie, I need you to get these 10 things done. And you get them and you come in and you go, hey, I got 11. I didn't do 10, I did 11. And then I go out and I talk to your people and they go, we'll take you out of this. A manager gets 11 and goes in proudly to their boss and says, I'm killing it here. And then you go out to their people and they go, that my manager's a complete asshole and treats us crappy and right. And so the point is that if you're not holding people accountable for how they're getting their performance, they're going to use any tool they can. And it's so much easier just to go to fear than it is to go to, hey, you know did you, I don't know if I don't know when this is going to air, sometime later in October, but it just so happened that the New York Mets came out back in the ninth inning last night with 4 runs and won a game that they clearly looked like they were going to lose. And it made me just think about the psychology of their team not getting down and believing that they could turn things around. And I just love that, the resilience. You can't build a resilient team when you're managing people with fear. Whatever that coach,
Mm.
he had those people prepared for it's 9 innings for a reason. No reason why you can't come back, it just, to me, it was like, when you manage with fear and fear and fear, you get to the 8th inning and you've been shut out, and nobody's getting any hits. You go into the 9th inning thinking it's just going to be another crappy inning and we're going to lose this game.
Yeah,
And
because now it's in your head. You can't get it out of your head that there's darkness at the end of the tunnel instead of light at the end of the tunnel.
but that's a leadership problem,
Yeah.
right? That's a leadership mistake. And so what I'm saying is that if board of directors or presidents of universities, whoever oversees these schools, if they're not doing a deep dive into how are you affecting people and how are people working together. So, in other words, is there collaboration or are people feeling like they need to compete with each other,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And how are they? What's the student feedback, and what's the feedback from the graduate students, and all the. So you're constantly being able to keep people on the straight and narrow. There has to be accountability for this, and if it's not, then you're just going to continue to see what you're going to see because it's easier, it's more efficient, and there's no consequences. So it's like my way or the highway, and that just doesn't serve anyone well. And I don't think any really great educational environment anymore is leading that way, gratefully.
Yeah.
So if you're running into it, it's a pretty clear sign that there's not a lot of enlightenment there.
Yeah. So let's look into the future. Let's dream for a second here. I always like to ask my guests this last question about the way forward for colleges and universities so that they can be places that are employers of choice. And so let's say that let's say you're talking to an aspiring university president, someone who's going up through the ranks, and they really, really want to get in there and they want to do a great job and they want to do right by their people. How would you, what would you tell them to ensure them that their influence needs to be felt across campus? How do they start that journey of making sure that they have a positive influence felt across campus among the faculty and staff? How do they lead from the heart? Where do they
But,
start?
I think the first thing you have to do is convince students that they're going to get a great education, right?
Mm.
So you've got to demonstrate that when you come here, you're going to learn something. So, I mean, and I think there are plenty of schools that are football oriented and don't really care about graduation, at least not of their players. And I don't care about those schools. I care about the schools where people are going to learn so that they can have a good career afterwards and become broadened in their understanding of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So start off with that, right? Promise me that if I'm going to stay 4 years and pay what you're charging me, that I'm going to learn something meaningful, something that can leverage the success of my life forever. That's the first promise. But I think the second promise is that you're not going to be alone here.
Mm.
You're going to have advocates for you. So even the president of a university should be having forums where they just get in front of students and say, this is what we're trying to do. These are the things that we're working on. These are the new professors that we've added. This is whatever accolades we're getting. These are the problems that we see. This is what we're trying to fix. And to engage students in that so that I feel like I'm contributing to my university versus my university is just telling me what to do kind of a thing. So, and that's very much a Gen Z thing, and Gen Z is who's going to college. So I would be responding to those people. I would be saying whatever this generation wants is what we should be giving them, as opposed to telling them that they're wrong and what their expectations are. I'm not saying break away your values. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if Gen Z wants more engagement in the way a university is run, and we've never done that before. Just to say we've never done that before, and every generation wants something they can't have, that misses the plot completely. The word gets out. You go to this school, and you're going to have attention. You go to the school, you're going to get a great education, but you're also going to be tapped on. And I love what you were suggesting about involvement. Like we want you to influence this. You're not an observer of the campus. You're a participant in it. So come out and come to rallies and organize clubs and do good in the world. Those are the things that I think are what people are really interested in.
What promises would you make to faculty and staff so that they feel motivated to deliver those services to students?
What does that mean?
So when you're talking to an aspiring president, and you know that you can't deliver these services if the students don't have the right faculty and staff, if they don't have people who genuinely care. How does that aspiring president start thinking about how they can motivate the people serving the students?
It's interesting because I'm working with somebody else on something not related at all to this. It's completely related to this, which is, if you can tell people what you're expecting, like a lot of leaders have a hard time doing that. They hope that people will understand what the mission is without saying, these are my expectations. These are my expectations. Like, this is how you're going to be evaluated. I need you. If you want to be a part of this team, if you want to be a part of this organization, this is what we stand for. These are our values. This is what I'm expecting from you every day. So if you expect that you can just get up in front of 300 students and teach a class and go back to your life and not have any engagement with those students and not sit down with people and see how they're doing and not be oriented towards their success, then there are other universities for you, but not this one. And I think because they're academics, they don't have that inclination in them. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we're really hoping to be a very, supportive program here. And we really hope that the students feel connected to their teachers. Where's the expectation? Okay, I get that, but where's the accountability? So you have to be able to, if you're aspiring, be able to come in and go, okay, welcome. I'm the new chancellor, and this is my dream. This is what I want to do. And I'm hoping everyone in this room is on board with this. I hope that these are your aspirations. If they're not, let me sit down with you and help you find something else because these are the expectations. That sounds really harsh, but Amazon just came out a few days ago and said, we want everybody back in the office 5 days a week. Now, I personally don't think that that's a very good decision for a technology company where a lot of these people could be working in a closet 5 days a week and don't need to have a whole lot of human interaction. It's not what their jobs are, but that's the decision they made.
Yeah.
What I like about it is they declared that's who we are. Mm-hmm. So now people can make the choice. Am I on board with that? Can I live with going into the office 5 days a week? Hell no. I'm going to leave, right? Or I'm okay with it. I'm going to stay. So now from this day forward, when Amazon is recruiting people, anybody who wants to work from home even a single day a week rather, is going to go, that's not a place for me. But they're going to end up attracting the people that they want going forward, right? And I think that's great. I think that's smart. It's like, that's what our culture wants to be. You don't have to be our culture, and don't criticize us for what we're choosing to do. That's what we're choosing to do. Yeah. So the high expectation part of professors and teaching them and coaching them on how to do this is a big element of what's missing, I suspect, right? They've just never done it before, right? So if they say, I'm on board, but I don't know how to do it, God bless you, we'll teach you. I want to be on board and I like where you're going. That if you don't get that, there's no point in coaching someone. They're not on board with it. Having a little courage to be direct and to tell people this is what we're expecting, because that's where you're going to get the translation.
Mark Crowley, he is the author of Lead from the Heart. He's also the host of the Lead from the Heart podcast. He's also a speaker. Mark, thank you so much for a great conversation. Thank you for joining me on I Want to Work There.
Thank you, Eddie.
I Want to Work There is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Mallory Wilsey, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbles, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.